I made the new transfer student cry again, and this time to comfort her, Logan Hayes threw a basketball straight at my face. In that exact moment, a cold, mechanical voice echoed in my mind. Emotional strategy complete. Then another monotone line followed. Full version available on Cloud Channel. Lucky Chen walked over and grabbed my wrist, his tone sharp with annoyance. "Remember this," he said. "The AI warned you not to make Diana Chu cry again. It was just a lesson, so stop complaining." Diana Chu was the transfer student who had just joined our class. I'd heard that she once cried for half an hour simply because she didn't get first place. So, during the sports festival, I had to take that throw head on, a clean, harsh impact that stung like fire. Along with the pain, there was also a strange sense of relief inside me. "Logan," I said quietly, "let's stop being friends. You're not as kind as I thought you were." Logan stared at me in disbelief. "You're ending our friendship just because I hit you with a basketball?" he asked, his tone incredulous. I shook my head. "It's not just that one time. Ever since Diana showed up, you've left me stranded 3 times. Let her teach me a lesson 8 times, and humiliated me in front of everyone 13 times just to please her. The worst part? Last time, you and your friends secretly left the campsite early, abandoning me alone in the wilderness. When people were worried, you said calmly, 'There aren't any wild animals here. What could possibly happen?' You even said that since I took first place from Diana, I deserved to be scolded. Since the day Diana Chu appeared, Logan has never stopped telling me to be more considerate of her. 'She's introverted and shy,' he said once. 'When she sees you running for class president, she feels jealous. You shouldn't be too competitive. She's sensitive and easily hurt. When she hears stories about our happy childhood, she just laughs bitterly, saying she only had a drunk father who beat her. She's so pitiful, Haley. What could you possibly have to compete with her for? Don't push her too far.' But Logan, did you ever remember that I was born with a congenital heart defect? That my body has always been too weak for me to even climb down this lonely mountain on my own? The Carter family and the Hayes family were once close neighbors, so ever since I was little I had been your tiny shadow, obediently holding on to the hem of your shirt and softly calling you Brother Logan. You always protected me, chasing away the kids who dared to call me weak. 'Haley's my little sister,' you'd say. 'Anyone who bullies her, I'll beat them up.' So when the system appeared and told me that if I could win Logan Hayes' heart, I would gain a healthy heart and a strong body, I accepted. I didn't understand what an emotional strategy really meant because I'd always cared about him. From innocent childhood to trembling adolescence, I had always been the shy girl walking behind him. Then the system told me the truth. This world was a novel. Logan Hayes was the male lead, Diana Chu was the female lead, and I, Haley Carter, was just a supporting character. I existed only to push the two of them together, and only when they fell in love would my mission be complete. The system said that ever since Diana appeared, she had been the only exception in Logan's heart. Only by treating me coldly would people see how much he treasured her. Only when I became the dull gray background could she shine in the warmth of his tenderness. Diana would be touched, she would find joy, she would let go of her insecurities, and finally take the first step toward him. She only needed to take one step, because Logan had already taken the other 99. But I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I refused to believe that the boy who grew up with me could truly be so heartless. Even if he didn't love me, after all these years we'd spent together, how could he abandon me for a girl he'd only known for a few months? How could he look down on me like that? Back then, I didn't understand why the system didn't argue with me. Now I do. Because the truth itself was the cruelest answer. From the campsite, I dragged myself out step by step. My palms were scraped, my knees bleeding. The night wind was freezing, but not as cold as the voice I heard ahead of me. Someone laughed and said, "You really did that to your childhood friend? Aren't you afraid she'll get angry? What if she decides to stop following you?" Logan Hayes chuckled, low, arrogant, and careless. "Why would I be afraid? She's followed me for years. She can't just stop. Besides," he shrugged, "if she really does, that'd be even better. I just don't want Diana to misunderstand." In that instant, it felt like my whole body was plunged into an icy pit. My heart seemed to stop. So he knew. They all knew. And yet, no one said a word. They just quietly watched me fool myself, watched me pretend that I was hiding it well. I let out a small, tired laugh. All these years I'd followed behind him patiently, devotedly, without ever feeling exhausted. Even after Diana Chu appeared, I still believed it was just a fleeting distraction. I kept telling myself that once he came to his senses, he'd remember. We grew up together. No one knew him better than I did. But he knew all that and still chose to take someone else's side, again and again. So what was the point of clinging to something so hopeless? Chasing someone for years is exhausting, and I was done. I didn't want to try anymore. Just then, Diana came running toward him, her face flushed and her voice trembling. "Logan," she panted, breathless. The crowd started murmuring and Logan looked at her, his expression relaxed and faintly amused. "What's wrong, Diana?" he asked with that confident half-smile. Her round eyes widened, nervous and conflicted. "I heard you abandoned Haley because of me. Is that true?" He tilted his head, his tone light, almost teasing. "So what if it is? Are you mad at me now?" He was handsome, his sharp, narrow eyes carried the same coolness as his mother's, and with just one glance, any girl's heart could skip a beat. Diana stammered. I'm really touched, but you shouldn't have done that. She'll be upset, and she might think it was my fault." Before she could finish, Logan pulled her into his arms. His voice rumbled low against her ear. "I only care about you. Why even bring her up? You know she wanted that title too, just to prove herself, and yet she still took it from you." Teaching her a lesson was already merciful. "If she dares to blame you, I won't forgive her." Diana trembled in his embrace, then slowly raised her hands and held him back. The two of them stood there, framed perfectly like a romantic scene from a movie. Cheers and applause erupted from around them until someone suddenly shouted, "Haley." Everyone turned at once. Through the muddy ground and flickering flashlight beams, I stumbled forward, covered in scratches and streaks of blood where the branches and thorns had torn my skin. My clothes were ripped, my steps uneven. I gasped for air, trying to stay upright. Someone cried out first, "Oh my God, she's hurt," and the crowd rushed toward me. I managed to hold myself up for a few seconds more before everything went dark. In that final moment before I lost consciousness, I saw Logan release Diana and turn toward me, startled. I could tell what he was thinking. "It's just a mountain. Her body's gotten so much stronger lately, hasn't it? Why did she faint? Why does she look like she's about to die?" But he didn't know. My body only grew stronger because every time I showed him kindness, he responded in kind. Now that his tenderness was gone, my strength was fading too, like an oil lamp flickering out in the wind. Then, amid the blur of darkness, that cold, mechanical voice echoed again. "So please rest assured, host. Once your mission is complete, you will fully recover." When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I saw was Logan Hayes' bloodshot eyes staring back at me. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, cold and familiar, sharp enough to make my skin crawl. Outside the hospital room, voices were raised in heated argument. "This morning our daughter was perfectly healthy when she left." My mother's trembling voice broke through, full of fury. "How could you leave her alone on the mountain? You took a whole group hiking, and now she's in a coma? We will press charges to the very end." I could hear other parents mixed in, stammering apologies, trying to explain. Then, through the chaos, came a rough, hoarse voice. "Haley, you're awake." Logan Hayes leaned down, relief flashing in his eyes. That look took me back to a distant memory, when we were children, and I caught a cold because he had run off to play. He had stayed by my bedside then, eyes red, voice soft and trembling. "I'll never leave you again. I'll always be with you, Haley." But now the boy who once made that promise said quietly, "I just wanted to teach you a lesson. I didn't think things would go this far." I stared at him, my thoughts echoing faintly inside. What did I do wrong? The math competition had been fair. Diana lost because of her own ability. How could anyone blame me? Yet Logan said, Diana really needed that opportunity. If she could just place high enough, she'd get early admission to college. You know her situation, Haley. She just wants to escape that family. So because she needed it, I had to give up? And what about me? Didn't I need it too? He looked at me like he was explaining some great truth. You can't compare the two of you, Haley. Diana grew up in a home where no one loves her. If she loses this chance, she's done for. But you've been loved since you were little. Even if you lose, nothing will change. It was the first time since Diana had appeared that he spoke to me gently. So Haley, don't blame her anymore. If you have to blame someone, blame me. Just don't let my parents get dragged into this, okay? I understood what he meant but didn't say aloud. If the investigation continued, Diana would be implicated too. So all that softness, all that pleading was only to protect her. I stared blankly up at the sterile white ceiling. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. There was no pain left, only emptiness. Maybe I'd stayed silent too long because Logan began to lose patience. He suddenly stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor, the sound splitting through the quiet room. "So what, Haley?" he shouted. "Is it a crime that I don't like you? I've looked after you for years. I'm sick of it. I can't go anywhere without dragging along a weak little girl. I have to comfort you over everything. Aren't you tired? Because I am. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Don't you dare take it out on Diana." His voice echoed in the small room before everything fell silent again. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the air. I said nothing, just blinked slowly. A faint tremor ran through my eyelashes, and that tiny movement was enough to make him curse under his breath. He raked a hand through his hair, frustration written all over his face. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry, okay?" My voice came out barely above a whisper, light enough to be carried away by a breath of wind. "You're right," I said. He froze. "What?" I turned my head toward him, my gaze calm but ice cold. "You're right, just as you wanted. I won't like Logan Hayes anymore." I gave a faint, brittle smile. "You're a good liar. You once promised you'd never abandon me, that you'd always stay by my side, forever." We were the same age. We'd known each other since the day we were born, same hospital, same preschool. Back then, your tiny shadow always stood in front of me, shielding me from everything. You'd turn back with that serious little face and say, "Haley, stay close, don't run off." And I always listened. I followed you everywhere, from childhood innocence, through the days when my heart began to understand love, until the 18th year of my life. That was the first time I stopped, the first time I let go of your sleeve. The first time I chose to walk down a road that led away from Logan Hayes. Because for once, I wanted something different. A body that could finally be strong on its own. "Good, I knew you wouldn't be that petty," Logan Hayes said with an easy smile, his voice lighter, relieved. But I couldn't tell how much of that relief came from knowing Diana Chu wouldn't be dragged into trouble, and how much came from knowing that I still loved him too much to blame him. I didn't bother guessing anymore. He went on, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "See? Isn't it better when you're this understanding? Diana's really shy. It took me forever to get her to even talk to me. If you keep showing up like that, she'll just misunderstand." I looked at the smile on his lips, the same smile that used to make me believe that if I just held on a little longer, he would finally turn back and see me. Like before, I nodded. But this time, it wasn't out of habit. This time it came from the bottom of my heart. "You don't have to keep your distance anymore," I said softly. "I'll do it myself. I'll stay away from you, far away." From the moment I agreed with the system to finish my mission, I also began to learn how to leave Logan Hayes behind. I stopped waking up early to wait outside his house so we could walk to school together. I stopped worrying about his stomach pain and bringing him breakfast every morning. I stopped showing up in front of him and Diana altogether. Now, when the classroom buzzed with gossip about the golden couple, and he deliberately praised Diana to belittle me, I simply kept my head down and copied notes quickly before erasing the board for cleanup duty. I was doing well. The progress bar in the system kept climbing higher. But then, Logan came to find me. He must have waited and planned for days, because I had been avoiding him for months. His eyes carried a hint of frustration, maybe even hurt. "Haley," he said, "I haven't had breakfast for 2 months now." If this had been before, I would have panicked, rushing to buy porridge out of fear that he'd skip a meal and get another stomachache. But now, I just looked at him calmly. "Is Diana the one who wants to eat?" I asked. "The porridge shop's still on our old route. Just walk straight, you'll find it." I knew perfectly well that ever since Diana appeared, every breakfast I brought had been placed on her desk. That was where the tension between Logan and me had begun. I still remembered that morning, Diana's eyes red as she whispered, "I won't eat anymore, Haley. I'm sorry. Please don't fight because of me." Then she had set down the bowl of porridge, clutching her cold bun in both hands, looking as pitiful as a stray kitten. Logan had immediately stepped in front of her, his tone icy. "What I do with the food I accept is my business. If it bothers you, just buy another one." Ridiculous, because I had bought another one. And yet he still gave all of it to Diana. So when he mentioned breakfast now, of course I thought he was asking for her again. Logan froze, caught off guard. "No, it's not for her. It's just." "For what then?" I asked quietly, though I already knew this was his usual way of making peace. Whenever we fought, all he had to do was speak first, and I would always soften. He knew that about me, but this time I said nothing. I just stood there, silent, his brows furrowed, his tone grew sharper. "Haley, are you doing this on purpose?" I still didn't react. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Great, really great. You think I can't live without you, huh? Go ahead, don't ever come back begging me." And with that, he turned and walked away. A few steps ahead, Diana Chu was waiting for him. As if to prove something, he pulled her into his arms. She flinched, glancing back at me for just a second before bowing her head, her cheeks flushing pink with embarrassment and confusion. I didn't look anymore. That night, the system's cold voice echoed in my head. Conquest progress, 99%. The next morning, Logan Hayes walked into class with Diana Chu by his side. The room filled with chatter and laughter as everyone congratulated them and teased them playfully. Diana smiled at me, her lips curving softly like a delicate flower blooming under sunlight. That very day, the exam results were announced. I ranked first. She cried for half an hour straight. And that was the reason why, later that afternoon during the sports festival, the basketball in Logan Hayes' hand came flying straight toward my face. But there was one thing. The system's voice chimed again. Conquest level, 100%. Mission complete. "Haley, are you pretending to be sick again?" Logan's voice echoed faintly in my memory. He didn't believe me when I said I truly wanted to end things. I wanted him to pay for what he had done. I didn't need to imagine how Logan Hayes would react when he heard the news. I already knew. And sure enough, he snapped. He gave a cold laugh and slammed his pen down on the desk. "Me? Apologize to Haley Carter? Don't make me laugh. Who does she think she is? Just because she says I should apologize, I have to? Because she says I'm wrong, I have to admit it? Who does she think she's talking to?" His voice rose so sharply that the entire classroom fell silent. Only Diana Chu's trembling sobs broke the stillness. "It's all my fault, Logan," she said in a shaky voice. "You only did it because you wanted to stand up for me. If Haley would just forgive you, I'll apologize in your place." "No need for you to apologize." Logan cut her off, his tone thick with anger. He didn't even seem to understand what he was furious about anymore. "Where's Haley? I want to talk to her." Our homeroom teacher's face was pale with rage. "Logan Hayes, do you have any idea where you are? The security cameras caught everything. You deliberately injured your classmate, and you still refuse to apologize? Haley already said, if you won't admit your fault, she'll file a formal complaint. And if she does, you'll have to bear full criminal responsibility. This will be on your record. It'll follow you for the rest of your life." That last sentence cut through the air like a blade. The room went dead quiet. No one even dared to breathe. Logan stood frozen, as if turned to stone. Diana's voice cracked as she cried. "It was just one throw. You hit her with a basketball. Does it really have to be such a big deal?" Yes, it did. That night when I returned home, I finally understood how much I'd worried my parents all this time. Seeing their faces, I felt a deep pang of guilt. My parents loved me so much, and yet I had kept all this from them. So I told them everything. Everything Logan had done. Everything except for the system. Our families had always been close. I knew that if I pursued legal action and Logan refused to apologize, it would put my parents in a difficult position. But only difficult, not impossible. My mother held me tightly, her voice breaking through sobs. "Oh, my poor girl, you've suffered so much." My father, a quiet man who rarely raised his voice, suddenly slammed his palm against the table. "This should have been done long ago. We only held back because you kept forgiving him. And now that boy dares to act like he's done nothing wrong? If he doesn't own up to it, don't blame me for cutting ties completely. Because I was so determined this time. When Mrs. Hayes came to our house, my parents had already decided not to answer the door. I could hear her crying outside the gate, her voice trembling and almost childish. "Haley, sweetheart, you know my son didn't mean any harm. It was just kids roughhousing. Why hold a grudge?" Hold a grudge? I slipped on my headphones, drowning out her voice. The college entrance exams were coming up, and everyone knew that if I really pressed charges, the consequences would be severe for both families. But this time, I wasn't backing down. That night, I heard that my father went straight to the Hayes house. Shouting echoed through the neighborhood, along with the sound of things breaking. Word spread that he'd tried to hit Logan. Mrs. Hayes had thrown herself in the way, crying hysterically, her wailing so loud that everyone nearby could hear it. It was obvious they were putting on a show, hoping the neighbors would rush in to mediate, hoping my parents would back down out of embarrassment. But my parents saw through it. That afternoon, they pulled me out of the house and shut the door behind us, smiling faintly. "If we stay, you'll just feel sorry for them again, so we're leaving for a few days. No hearing, no softening up." So we left on a spontaneous trip and didn't come home for 2 days. When we returned, the neighbors told us that Logan Hayes had been carried out of his house, badly beaten, and taken to the hospital. The next day, Diana Chu visited him on behalf of the whole class. She took one look at him, burst into tears, and snapped a photo to send to me. Attached was a long message full of reproach. "Haley," she wrote, "you went too far. Logan only hurt you by accident. How could you be so cruel in return? Look at what happened. He's beaten black and blue. Are you satisfied now?" At that moment, I was standing by the sea. The salty wind blew through my hair, carrying the scent of waves. I opened her message, scrolled slowly, and looked at the photo. In it, Logan Hayes was lying on a hospital bed. His face was slightly swollen with a few bruises. He looked pitiful, but somehow not enough to be truly sympathetic. It was obvious Mr. Hayes hadn't hit him hard. The whole thing was just for show. It looked bad, but it wasn't serious at all. And anyone could tell, the photo was taken specifically to send to someone. I stared at the image for 2 seconds, then curled my lips into a faint smile and typed a single, cold line. "If there's no apology and no compensation, we'll go to court." Then I blocked the number. At the hospital, after reading my message, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes' faces went pale. Logan immediately turned to Diana Chu, frowning anxiously. "What did she say? What did Haley say to you?" Diana froze, startled, still speechless when Logan snatched the phone from her hands. Muttering under his breath, he started typing quickly. "She's probably just asking how bad it is. She doesn't really mean it. Always overreacting," he grumbled, pressing send. But a red exclamation mark appeared on the screen. Message failed to deliver. It was only then that he saw my brief, definitive text. His hand froze midair, and for some reason, a sharp ache pricked his chest. A few days later, my homeroom teacher called me into the office. His tone was lighter than usual, almost relieved. "The Hayes family has agreed," he said. "They'll issue a public apology and double the compensation, just as you requested." I only nodded. That Monday, under the national flag, in front of the entire school, Logan Hayes stood on the stage, gripping a piece of paper with trembling hands. Every word caught in his throat. "Haley Carter," he said, his voice hoarse, echoing through the courtyard. "I'm sorry." The morning wind brushed against my face as I stood among the crowd, head tilted upward toward the stage. Sunlight fell across his features, revealing every line of humiliation and anger. For someone as proud as Logan, this must have felt like a public execution. I thought that from this moment on, he would hate me. He'd always been the type to hold grudges, never forgetting even the smallest slight. I figured we'd finally be done with each other, strangers from here on out. But I was wrong. He began to change. Before, I was the one waiting for him every morning so we could walk to school together. Now it was him waiting for me, standing in the same spot, the same posture, only the roles reversed. His eyes always carried a flicker of hesitation, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. I walked past him without a glance, without a word. He would quietly follow behind. The teachers were thrilled. "Finally," they said, "he's focusing on his studies." Logan was smart, everyone knew that, but he'd never taken school seriously. Now his grades were improving so fast that even the faculty was amazed. Meanwhile, Diana Chu's grades plummeted. She reverted to the timid, fragile girl she'd been when she first transferred, sensitive, withdrawn, and easily shaken. It reminded me of those romance stories where after the heroine is saved by the hero's love, everything ends with a happily ever after. But no one ever tells her that after happiness comes 1,000 more difficult steps they still have to walk together. She started getting called into the teacher's office constantly, scolded over and over again. Every time she returned, her eyes were red and swollen. One afternoon, she suddenly turned to look at me with such bitterness that I was genuinely taken aback. Then she buried her face in her arms and began to cry. I frowned, confused, but said nothing. I lowered my head, packing my books a little slower than usual, and because of that 2-second delay, I ran into Logan Hayes in the hallway. He stopped, startled, eyes wide with alarm, as if he'd just witnessed something terrible. "Are you not feeling well again?" he asked. He still thought that the reason I'd been absent a few days ago was because my illness had relapsed. I suddenly remembered how in the past, whenever I even looked pale, he'd panic and carry me straight to the nurse's office, as if I were something fragile that could shatter in his arms at any moment. But later, when my condition worsened more often, he got used to it. Whenever I looked tired, he'd just shrug and say, "If you're not feeling well, just rest. No one's forcing you to follow me." It had been a long time since he'd last worried about my health. If he still cared, he would have known that during my most recent checkup, the doctor had looked at my test results in astonishment, calling me a medical miracle. And just as his hand was about to as his hand almost touched me, I stepped back half a pace and shook my head gently. "It's fine," I said softly. He froze, his hand suspended awkwardly in midair. His voice trembled a little. "Then, I'll get going." I lifted my gaze, meeting his eyes with calm detachment. "Excuse me," I said evenly. "Could you move aside?" He blinked, confused. I continued, "I'm leaving. I got early admission. There's no reason for me to stay anymore." Just as the system had told me, I was only a supporting character, a faint shadow in the love story between the male lead and the female lead. I existed merely as the backdrop that made his gentleness toward someone else shine brighter. Now the mission was complete. The male and female leads had finally found each other, and I, too, had gained a healthy body. There was nothing left to regret. But somehow, Logan Hayes misunderstood. He gave a small, trembling laugh. "Haley, are you really planning to avoid me forever?" I said nothing. He gritted his teeth, his voice low and strained. "If you're doing this just to make me bow my head, fine, you win." His eyes were bloodshot, and there was something like desperation in his tone. "These days without you, they felt empty, Haley. Completely empty." His voice shook as he spoke, his eyes red and glistening, like he was the one who had been hurt all this time, not me. "I know everything was my fault," he said, "but I already apologized. What more do you want from me?" His tone turned soft, almost accusing, as if I were the unreasonable one refusing to forgive. "You'd really throw everything away over one misunderstanding? You used to say you'd always be by my side." I stayed silent, just looking at him. His eyes flickered over my face like a faint beam of light, filled with hesitation and pleading. "Haley," he whispered, "Diana's life has been really hard. I just wanted you to give her a little room. I didn't think you'd be this cold, always trying to compete with her for everything. That's why He stopped mid-sentence. "But I already knew the rest of it. That's why you had to teach me a lesson." So that's what he thought all along, that I deserved to be hurt. I smiled faintly, almost without emotion, and asked quietly, "And what if I don't?" He looked startled, clearly not expecting me to interrupt. I continued, my tone calm, each word deliberate. "You really do pity her, I can tell. But tell me, was her miserable family my fault? Was it my fault she didn't score first in the competition? Why should I have to give up everything for her sake? I don't owe her anything, Logan. And I don't owe you either." For the first time in his life, confusion flashed in his eyes, like he was looking at a stranger. I didn't care. I brushed past him, pushing his hand away as he tried to reach for me, and walked straight ahead. Behind me, his hoarse voice called out, "I'm sorry." I stopped, hearing him continue, his voice trembling with urgency. I really regret it. When I was in the hospital, I realized that whenever I got hurt, you were always there to take care of me. But this time, every time I woke up and saw that empty space by my bed, I thought maybe you were hurting too. He gave a broken laugh, his tone softening. I know I was stupid. I just want you to forgive me. We used to be so good together. How did it turn out like this? I don't understand. I don't understand how one impulsive moment, a few careless words, could make you actually let go. To him, I had always been the gentle, obedient girl who would wait forever for him to turn back. He didn't realize that this time, I had truly walked away. He grabbed my wrist tightly, his voice raw. I'll break up with Diana. I've been studying hard. Remember how we used to talk about going to the same university? This time I mean it. I won't lie again. I pulled my hand free and replied simply, sure. Whatever. The next day, I actually saw him and Diana Chu fighting in the hallway. Her sobs echoed through the corridor. You're everything to me, she cried. You're leaving me too? Everyone leaves me, Diana Chu cried, her voice breaking. Logan Hayes clenched his jaw and looked away, his knuckles turning white from how tightly he was gripping his hands. But before he could even respond, chaos struck. Diana's drunk father suddenly burst through the school gates, a knife in one hand, shouting incoherently as he staggered forward. Where's that little bitch? He screamed, reeking of alcohol. I already took the dowry money, and now she dares to run away? Bring her here. I'll kill her. His furious roar echoed through the courtyard. I've got nothing left to lose, he bellowed. I'll drag all of you down with me. Then came the storm. Screams filled the air as students scattered in panic, tripping over one another as they ran. I was shoved backward into the chaos, my chest tightening, breath breaking apart. Through the blur, I saw Logan Hayes pushing against the tide of students, his face stricken with fear. Haley, he shouted, reaching his hand toward me, but at that exact moment a shrill cry came from behind him. Logan, help me. It was Diana Chu's trembling, desperate voice. He froze for just 1 second. But it was enough. I saw him bite down hard, his expression torn before turning away. Haley, wait for me, just a second. But there was no more time. I was not the quiet supporting character who stood still and waited to be saved according to someone else's script. I refused to play that role. While he shielded Diana, standing in front of her like the hero he was meant to be, I used all my strength to crawl out of the panicked crowd. Every step burned. Every breath scraped my throat raw. I had no idea how many times I'd been trampled. I only knew that my arms and legs were trembling, covered in cuts and bruises. When I finally stumbled out of the chaos, I collapsed in a corner of the schoolyard, gasping for air, my entire body limp and aching. The sting in my arm slowly faded as my consciousness blurred. Not far from me, the drunken man was finally restrained, still thrashing and screaming hoarsely. She's my daughter. I have the right to sell her. You people have no right to stop me. A dark trail of blood streaked across the pavement beneath him. In the commotion, I saw Logan Hayes clutching his bleeding arm, blood dripping between his fingers. Diana Chu ran to him, wrapping her arms around him as she sobbed uncontrollably. I thought I'd lost you, Logan. I was so scared. He froze for a moment, then finally lifted his hand to return her embrace. It was gentle, just gentle enough to convince everyone watching that everything painful, everything broken, had finally come to an end. Even the system's voice echoed in my head again, calm and satisfied, like a director watching the final perfect scene of a movie. See, host, it said. This is the fate of the male and female leads. They were born to belong to each other. You're just a supporting character. You were never meant to change the story. Its tone was detached, like it was reading the ending aloud. I smiled faintly, no anger, no argument. I simply stood up, bracing a hand on my knee, and quietly walked away from the scene. They'd gotten their happy ending. And I could finally leave this story behind. Across the yard, Logan Hayes held the trembling girl in his arms, whispering softly, "It's okay. It's over. You're safe now." He lowered his head with a faint smile. "See? I'm fine. Just a scratch." Then he chuckled under his breath. "Why are you and Haley both like this? Always making a big deal out of everything." But as soon as he said it, his body went rigid. A flash of panic crossed his eyes. He released Diana and spun around, looking wildly behind him. "Haley?" But I was gone. He ran to where I'd been standing moments ago, but there was nothing, just a few scattered footprints on the pavement and a couple of buttons that had been torn off in the chaos. No trace of me. No one at all. The aftermath shook the entire school. Diana's father was arrested and sentenced for assault, while she, the supposed victim, became the center of gossip. People whispered that she had known her father was coming, that she'd seen the knife in his hand, and instead of calling the police or warning anyone, she'd simply run away, leaving others to face the danger she'd caused. The rumor spread quickly, but very quickly, all those rumors were silenced, crushed by the power of the Hayes family. After all, Diana Chu was now the hero's girlfriend. The girl Logan Hayes had risked his life to save during the chaos. That day, he had practically torn through the whole school looking for me. But before he could even make it past the gates, his parents dragged him straight to the hospital to treat his wounds. Diana stayed glued to his side, eyes brimming with tears, clutching his hand as if she'd never let go. Logan looked up at his father, his tone anxious. What about Haley? She was hurt. What if her heart condition came back? Mr. Hayes's expression darkened. Now you remember her? It's too late for that. The Carter family has cut all ties with us. Do you plan to drag this family's name through the mud any further? Each word landed like a slap. Mr. Hayes had once hoped to strengthen the bond between their two families, to merge business interests. But because of his son's foolishness, that 15-year friendship had completely collapsed. No one in the Hayes family dared to mention my name again. From that moment until the college entrance exams, Logan was strictly monitored, barely allowed to leave the house. But he didn't seem in a hurry to anyway. Not until the night of the graduation party. Inside the banquet hall, laughter and music filled the air. Before Logan arrived, the room was already buzzing with jokes and congratulations. Let's toast to our hero, Logan Hayes, someone shouted. The guy who fearlessly saved his girlfriend in the chaos. Seriously. Another student chimed in, laughing. The perfect couple, handsome and brave, meets sweet and delicate. A match made in heaven. I heard he charged into the crowd to pull Diana out. Man, that's badass. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. Logan was the star of the evening. In one corner, a boy nudged his friend and snickered. See? Even that pathetic lapdog finally got dumped. Haley Carter's gone, clean break. Another student joined in, teasing. Didn't Logan say he'd been sick of his childhood friend for ages? Guess she finally got the hint and disappeared. Diana, sitting beside them, blushed and waved her hands nervously. Don't say that. If Haley heard, she'd be upset. But she didn't notice the strange, fleeting looks that passed between everyone else. And at that exact moment, the door opened. Logan Hayes stepped in, still wearing his school uniform. His expression was cold. Eyes sweeping across the room before he spoke, his low voice trembling slightly. Where's Haley? The room went silent. Only the faint background music continued, slow and distant. A boy finally cleared his throat and muttered, Didn't she get direct admission to Capital University? That's impossible, Logan said, a short, disbelieving laugh breaking from his lips. She told me she was applying to South University. We promised each other. She must have gone on a trip or something. Someone else chimed in awkwardly. Yeah, probably. She'll be back soon. Logan clenched his fists, his mind already racing. He'd planned everything. He would wait for me to return, then explain everything, clear things up with Diana, and start over. We were supposed to go to the same university. There would still be time. There was still a chance. But then, a voice from the back of the room said, calm and certain, she's not coming back. The entire room fell silent again. The light caught Logan's pale face, highlighting the disbelief frozen there. A month later, he shot up from his chair mid-lecture, pushed past his classmates, and ran straight out of the school. Ignoring the whispers behind him, he sprinted through the streets, heading to my old neighborhood, the one where, every morning, I used to stand on the balcony and wave to him. But now, the building stood empty. No lights, no sound. A realtor was pasting a for-sale notice on the wall. When he looked up and saw Logan standing there, breathless, he asked casually, Looking for someone? The Carter family, maybe? Logan's voice came out hoarse. Where are they? The man sighed, waving his hand. They'd been gone for a while. This place was sold a few days ago. Heard the daughter got into Capital University, so the whole family moved up there for work. Logan froze on the sunlit street. The summer air shimmered with heat, cicadas buzzing loudly in the trees. The world around him felt blindingly bright and unbearably late. Meanwhile, in the capital, my parents truly had settled down. They'd expanded their business, and by coincidence, the major I chose was directly connected to their field. I started working alongside them, healthy, clear-minded, free. No more fainting spells, no more stabbing pain in my heart. The things that once felt like unreachable dreams were now within my grasp. The system, the same one that had shadowed my youth, had kept its promise. It gave me a healthy body, and in return, I left the world of the male and female leads behind. Then it vanished, without a trace, without a farewell, without even a word of reminder. I thought that was the end. Their story had reached its conclusion, and finally, my life had begun. But 3 years later, after I had officially taken over the company, that familiar mechanical voice echoed in my mind once more, cold, detached, as if it had never been gone. "Apologies, host. Your 3 wishes could not be fulfilled." I froze, tapping my pen lightly against the desk. 3 wishes? Yes, the system replied flatly. You once wished never to see me again, never to see Diana Chu again, and never to see Logan Hayes again. Unfortunately, it paused, all 3 have failed. I stayed silent for a few seconds. The system's mechanical voice seemed almost confused. It's strange, it continued. The male and female leads went through countless hardships to be together, yet they're not happy. It paused again before speaking softly. After you left, Logan Hayes and Diana Chu broke up once. He went nearly insane looking for you, traveling back and forth between South City and the capital. But you weren't in the dorms anymore, and you changed majors halfway through. You even started your internship early. In a city this big, it would have been a miracle if he'd found you. Resting my chin on my hand, I let out a small, amused laugh. If he did find me, that would truly be a miracle. The system continued matter-of-factly. By senior year, despite his parents' objections and Diana's tears, he still chose to marry her. After graduation, the 2 of them became something of a legend at the university, praised as soulmates destined by fate. I chuckled softly, my voice light as a breeze. That's great then. What does that have to do with me? There was a long pause, followed by the system's rasping reply. He wants a divorce. I had barely opened my mouth to respond. If he's getting divorced, what does that have to do with me? When the system practically short-circuited. He found out where you are, it shouted in my head. He said he wants to make up for the regrets of his youth. You're supposed to be the supporting character. How did you suddenly become the first love he can't forget? I laughed quietly, my fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. Maybe the writer got bored and decided to add an epilogue. The system was silent for a few seconds, then sighed, an oddly human sound, as if even an AI could feel exasperated. I'll never understand why you humans love digging up old wounds. Because some people, I said calmly, never realized they were the wound to begin with. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message popped up on the screen. Haley, it's been forever. Are you coming to the class reunion? I narrowed my eyes slightly, the corner of my lips curving into a faint smile. Take a guess. I'd never cared much for those nostalgic gatherings where people tried to relive their golden youth. But this year, my company happened to be partnering on a major project with the firm headed by my old class vice president. For the sake of business, I decided to attend. As for seeing Logan Hayes and Diana Chu again, well, that was purely coincidence. The reunion banquet was being held in the room right next to my meeting venue. When the class vice president accidentally pushed open the wrong door, he froze the moment he saw me sitting there with a middle-aged man. The warm amber light reflected off my ivory silk dress. He stood stunned for a beat before blurting out, Haley Carter? Is that really you? You came back? I looked up, smiling politely as I nodded. It was my first time returning after so many years, yet everything felt strangely the same, only the faces had gathered a few faint traces of time. The class vice president's eyes swept over me with a not-so-subtle boldness, lingering briefly on the diamond pendant at my throat, before darting toward the man seated beside me. Didn't think you'd actually show up, he said, his tone laced with a hint of mockery. That man had once been one of Logan Hayes' closest friends. After graduation, he'd followed Logan into business, and eventually clawed his way up to deputy director of a small company. His swagger, his smug tone, it was all exactly the same as back in school, like he still believed he had the right to lecture everyone from a pedestal. Well, Haley Carter, he said, arching an eyebrow with a cold smirk. Do you really still hold a grudge over what happened back then? It was just a basketball to the face, wasn't it? You stormed off like Logan owed you his life? Do you even know how many years he searched for you? That guy grew up with everything handed to him, but for the first time, he was out there running around like a madman because of you. Did you have any idea what that did to him? He crossed his arms, lowering his voice to a falsely patient tone, the kind men use when they think they're being wise. You're back now, so stop being so stubborn. I don't want to see brothers ruining themselves over some woman again. I looked at his greasy, self-satisfied face and smiled faintly, my voice calm and airy. And what about it? Tilting my head slightly, I let my eyes curve with amusement. You think I'm so desperate I'd eat trash? Don't flatter yourself, and don't mistake me for a garbage bin that has to hold every piece of filth tossed my way. He clearly hadn't expected me to talk back like that. His face flushed a deep red almost instantly. This was a man who'd tasted a sliver of power and thought that gave him the right to talk down to the world. He opened his mouth to snap something, but I cut him off, my tone still mild. I heard your company's been having trouble getting funding. If you don't want to go bankrupt faster, I suggest you stop testing my patience. The smile froze on his lips. I could almost see the calculations behind his eyes. In the polished, deceptive world of business, I knew exactly who actually had power and who was just pretending. He forced out a brittle laugh. It's just temporary. Once I finalize the investment deal with Sterling Group, everything will be fine. But his eyes flashed with irritation. Women, he spat quietly. You think having a little money means you can look down on people? With that, he turned and stormed off. Yet after a few steps, he stopped, glanced back and sneered. You really think you're something now? Don't forget, you used to be nothing but Logan Hayes's lapdog. Why act so high and mighty? Sooner or later, you'll crawl back to him, begging just like before. His gaze flicked to the middle-aged man sitting beside me, and his voice grew venomous. And now you're having dinner with this old man? Who knows what kind of filthy things you've done in the capital to get where you are. Don't pretend that money's clean. The room temperature seemed to drop instantly. The middle-aged man, my business partner, Director Wang, who had been calmly sipping his wine until then, set his glass down and slowly rose to his feet. He tilted his head slightly and smiled, his raspy voice carrying the effortless authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms. You're right about one thing, he said evenly. Miss Carter doesn't look down on us. Then Director Wang turned to me, his expression smoothing into one of professional respect, almost reverent. Miss Carter, he said carefully, about the project proposal we discussed earlier. I could barely stand to look at the slick sheen of sweat on his forehead and the awkwardly sycophantic smile. Closing my eyes briefly, I kept my tone composed. Director Wang, I said, you told me this was a project meeting, yet apparently anyone can just walk in. I'm starting to think your company may not be serious about this partnership. Perhaps I should reconsider. Wait, please, Miss Carter. Director Wang blurted out in a panic. His demeanor changed in an instant, all charm gone, replaced by the anxious professionalism of a man terrified of losing a deal. He turned furiously on the class vice president. Who are you? Who let you in here? And another thing. Who said Sterling Group agreed to invest in your company? How come I've never heard of this supposed deal? The man's face went pale. A sick feeling crept up his throat. You, who the hell are you two? He didn't finish. The door suddenly swung open again. Logan Hayes walked in. He'd come to meet the vice president, but the moment he saw Director Wang, his expression brightened with hope. Director Wang, he greeted eagerly. But then his eyes found me. The woman sitting calmly at the wine table, legs crossed, the faintest smile at the corner of my lips. His body went rigid. Haley, his voice came out hoarse, tinged with disbelief and something like shame. Director Wang let out a short huff, immediately understanding the situation. Ah, so it's you, he said dryly. I've told you several times already, your company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Sterling isn't investing in you, so what are you still doing here? Director Wong's tone was cold, slicing through the air. The Hayes family had once built its empire on technology, but in recent years, the field had changed too quickly. And Logan Hayes, the heir, lacked any real sense for business. He was impulsive, acting on emotion, not logic, and he had dragged the company from its peak straight into decline. Now, with their capital chain broken, Sterling was the only lifeline left. Even so, Logan tried to keep his composure. He understood perfectly that this was not a chance he could afford to lose. Even with me sitting right there, he forced himself to bow slightly, voice low, his pride crushed but still fighting to breathe. "It was my mistake, Director Wong," he said hoarsely. "Please forgive the person I brought with me." This was the same man who, years ago, had blushed red with humiliation just for being told to apologize in front of the school. And now, he was bowing his head, lowering himself completely, right in front of me. Director Wong glanced sideways at me, trying to read my reaction. But when I remained silent, merely watching, he raised his voice sharply. "Apologize. Don't you see Miss Carter is still sitting here?" The air in the room turned heavy, suffocating. Both the former class vice president and Logan froze. They understood immediately what was being implied. The person they were supposed to kneel and apologize to wasn't Director Wang. It was me. Logan's eyes locked on mine, filled with a fragile, desperate flicker of hope. He was waiting for me to speak, to say enough, to let him keep at least a shred of dignity. But I only lowered my gaze, gently blowing on the still wet polish on my nails. Under the light, the smooth, glassy surface gleamed like crystal. I smiled faintly, though not at him. His face drained of color, the mix of anger, shame, and helplessness twisting inside those once proud eyes. Then, suddenly he turned and kicked the vice president hard. The man fell to the floor, trembling, stammering between frightened gasps. "Haley, I was wrong. I didn't mean it, I was just joking. Just a joke, that's all." I looked down slightly, my gaze resting on the jade bracelet around my wrist, the one I'd bought for myself the first year I became CEO. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "At least you finally said something that sounds decent." The tension in the room grew heavier, almost tangible. The noise from our confrontation carried enough that the partition between the two rooms rattled open. Curious classmates from the reunion next door peeked in. "Wait, Haley Carter? It's really you?" One of them blurted out. "What's going on here? Why are the vice president and Logan?" The word pathetic never made it past their lips. They didn't need to say it. The sight before them said it all. Enough to freeze the once most admired man in the city in his place. Someone whispered, stunned, "Wasn't he the CEO now?" The vice president said he was doing great in business. "Then why the hell is he kneeling like that?" another murmured. Logan's fists clenched tightly. He wanted to explain that this was all a misunderstanding, a coincidence, that none of this was what it looked like. But his throat locked up, as if an invisible hand was choking the words back. Because I still hadn't said a single thing. Director Wang, ever the cunning businessman, saw the opportunity instantly. He slammed his palm against the table, his voice booming across the room. "What kind of attitude is this? You come begging for investment and dare show such disrespect to my guest?" Then, with a measured pause, he turned to me, his tone suddenly grave. "I'll be honest, Miss Carter, if you leave here today unhappy, then this investment deal is off the table, permanently." The words hit like a hammer. All the color drained from Logan's face. He understood completely. If this deal fell apart, the Hayes family company would collapse for good. He bit down hard, lowering his head even further. Then, slowly, he lifted a glass of wine from the table. His eyes met mine one last time, wordless, hollow. And then he drank. The burn of liquor traced down his throat, harsh and unrelenting. It reminded me of that day years ago, when he had watched me cry and turned his back. When the glass was empty, he slammed it down on the table. The sharp clang echoed in the silence. The white wine scorched his stomach, and his face turned pale, his lips trembling uncontrollably. He finally slumped back into the chair, one hand clutching his stomach, his voice hoarse. "Haley, my stomach hurts." In his eyes flickered a faint, pleading light, like if I just showed a hint of compassion, he might be saved. But I didn't move. My gaze stayed calm, almost cruel, mirroring that same look he once gave me years ago, when I tried desperately to explain that I hadn't hurt Diana Chu. and he sat there, unmoving, watching as I broke down in despair. Now our roles were reversed. My tone was as cold as a night breeze. It's just a lesson. Is that really worth whining about? Something in him seemed to crack. It was as if his soul had been drained in an instant. The only sound in the room was the soft clatter of a glass rolling off the table before shattering on the floor. A sharp scream broke through the silence. Diana shoved through the onlookers, rushing toward him and wrapping her arms around him. I'd heard that after they got married, she quit her job to devote herself to being the perfect, gentle wife. Now, seeing her husband curled up in pain, she completely lost control. Pointing at me, she shouted, "Haley, are you even human? Logan has stomach ulcers. How could you do this to him?" I laughed softly, the sound slicing through the air like a thin blade. He could have chosen not to drink. The moment I said it, Director Wong immediately jumped in, his tone fawning to the point of absurdity. Yes, of course. President Hayes, these are just the rules of the business world. You make a mistake, you pay for it. Surely you understand that." Logan pushed Diana's hands away and forced himself to stand. He ignored everyone else, his bloodshot eyes locked on me. His voice was raw, shaking. "If I drink this one too, will you forgive me?" The question silenced the entire room. Even Diana's sobs stopped short. Before I could reply, he tilted his head back and emptied the glass in one long gulp. Every drop. The sound of the cup hitting the table was dry and sharp. I watched him, but all I felt was exhaustion. It was nothing but a clumsy performance, an unsolicited act of repentance. When I left the room, Director Wong personally walked me out, bowing and smiling obsequiously. It was almost comical. Just as I was about to get into the car, a familiar voice cut through the night air. "Wait, we need to talk." I turned around. It was Diana Chu. She stood in front of the car door, eyes red and swollen, but her chin lifted high like she was clinging to the last scraps of pride. I glanced at her and spoke evenly. "You don't seem qualified." Her brows furrowed. I went on, voice cool. "Even Logan Hayes isn't worthy of sitting across from me. And you, empty-handed, trapped in a dying marriage, what do you have that makes you think we're equals?" She looked like a wounded animal, trembling before she suddenly lashed out, her voice breaking into a scream. "I'm not like you. I'm not fake like you are. You say you loved him, but you left him without even looking back. I would do anything for him." She lifted her chin, her expression fierce, as if she'd just claimed victory. "Haley, you're not worthy. You're not worthy to even appear in front of Logan. So what if he still can't forget you? We're married now. He's my husband. As long as I don't divorce him, you'll always be the pathetic third party, the shameless intruder." A laugh slipped from my lips, quiet but genuine, tinged with something close to pity. "Do you actually think I still love him?" Her eyes flickered with doubt. I continued, my tone light and detached. "He's a middle-aged man now, out of ambition, out of pride, defeated in both his career and his marriage. What part of that sounds appealing to you?" Diana's face went pale. She bit her lip and stammered, You just don't understand him. Logan has potential, he has dreams. He's just been waiting for the right chance." Her voice trembled, full of desperate conviction. "He saved me from the darkness. He made me believe I was worthy of being loved." The more she spoke, the shakier her voice became, her eyes glazing over with a kind of fragile devotion. "He's the light of my life. Only when I'm with him do I feel safe, cherished, like I'm truly someone's only one." I looked at her silently, my expression faintly softening, but only with the kind of pity one feels for someone trapped in their own illusion. If I hadn't once been dragged down just to make her shine, maybe I would have found her little monologue touching. Unfortunately, in their story, I was always meant to be the backdrop, the dirt beneath their feet. I spoke slowly, my tone still soft. "You should divorce him." Diana froze, as if I'd stepped on an open wound. Her face flushed crimson before she shouted, "You're jealous, aren't you? You have everything, money, power, status, but you never got Logan. You're jealous because in the end, he chose me. You want me to divorce him so you can crawl back to him, right? Keep dreaming, Haley." She regained her false confidence after that, straightening her back and walking away, her heels striking the floor like war drums. I watched her leave, tilting my head slightly, genuinely puzzled. If she doesn't divorce him, does she actually plan to go bankrupt with him and share half the debt? But soon after, news of the Hayes Corporation's bankruptcy spread through the city. And the one who had delivered the killing blow was me. My return to this city had nothing to do with nostalgia. Yes, there were lingering ties to the past, but that wasn't why I came back. I was here to expand my company's market share. And the Hayes Corporation, already crumbling, was the perfect stepping stone for acquisition. My strategic partner, Sterling Group, knew it too. They were more than happy to go with the flow, officially withdrawing their plan to invest and save the Hayes Corporation. And just like that, the last fraying thread finally snapped. The capital chain broke completely, debts piled high, and Logan Hayes collapsed amid the ruins he had built with his own hands. During those days, he and a few former associates ran everywhere, begging banks, investment funds, old classmates, family friends, but it was useless. Eventually, someone took pity on him and hinted quietly, "Sterling is still alive because of her. You really had the guts to provoke her? That's just asking to die." The world is simple. The one with power decides who gets to live and who doesn't, with just a word. Late one night, I received a call. The voice on the other end was trembling, filled with regret. "Haley, now I understand. If it hadn't been for your illness back then, maybe I was never even qualified to stand beside you." I smiled faintly and hung up. A moment later, the system's familiar monotone rang in my head. Mission complete. From that moment on, Logan and I were no longer standing on the same line. Acquiring his company was just a minor move in my long-term strategy, a single calculated step on a much larger board. Nothing more, nothing less. But men like him never really change. They always think a few apologies can fix everything. "We were wrong back then, Haley. Please forgive us. If you just save the company once, Logan will marry you immediately." I didn't bother replying. Like every other empty plea, that message vanished into silence. Then came the flood of debts. One by one, his old allies began trembling, begging for mercy. "We were wrong, Miss Carter. Back then, we just thought you were weak, so we messed with you. Every time you stopped Logan from joining us, he paid our bills, so we decided to teach you a lesson. Please, forgive us." When I didn't respond, their tone shifted, filth bubbling up from panic. "Why are you taking it out on us? It was Logan who hurt you. If you want revenge, go after him." I laughed softly. "All right then," I murmured. "If that's what you want." And I gave them exactly what they asked for, by letting Logan Hayes carry the burden of debt 10 times over. They said that when the news broke, his mother fainted on the spot, and his father went running everywhere, desperately seeking help. Eventually, he came to my parents, begging them to call me and ask me to show mercy. When my father handed me the phone, I answered calmly. "I understand," I said evenly. "I sympathize." He sighed in relief. "Then about this situation," I interrupted gently, my voice polite but detached. "But if I show mercy, I'll lose about 2 million. There was silence on the other end for exactly 3 seconds. Then came a short, resigned reply. "Forget it then," came the flat voice on the other end before the line went dead. I couldn't help but laugh, shrugging lightly. In the business world, there's no such thing as sentiment or debt of gratitude, only winning and losing. And between Logan Hayes and me, there had never been anything as foolish as love to begin with. One morning, while I was reviewing a contract, my secretary knocked softly and spoke in a careful tone. "Director Carter, there's a man and a woman here asking to see you. The man says his name is Logan Hayes." My eyebrows lifted slightly. I gestured for her to transfer the call through. When the line connected, his voice came trembling, carrying a trace of desperate pleading. "Haley, there's so much I want to say." I cut him off, my tone cold and even. "Escort them out." The secretary nodded, and moments later I heard the distant professional voice of the building's security over the intercom. "Understood, Miss Carter." I leaned back in my chair. Sunlight streamed through the window, spilling across the golden floor like honey. Everything was calm, immaculately calm. The game was over. The winner had no need to explain, and the loser no longer had the right to speak. The story between Logan Hayes and me, from that moment on, was closed forever.